He said I was overthinking. That I was imagining things. That I didn't understand how this industry worked. But I wasn't wrong. I was just quiet until I wasn't. Now I'm walking into the gala on Nico Rey's arm, the room parting like I own it. The man who stole my work asks, was any of it real? I say, it could have been, and walk away. I wasn't supposed to be in the office that late. The lights had dimmed on their automatic setting and the cleaning crew had already passed through. Everyone else had gone home after the product launch prep, but I had stayed behind, telling myself it was to polish slide 11. In truth, I was avoiding Julian's apartment. Our apartment. Julian Marsh, founder and CEO of Marsh & Vale Creative, was my boss by title, my boyfriend by unfortunate coincidence, and lately my biggest distraction. I'd sensed something shifting between us. The way his messages had shortened. The way he used to call me Cammy even in board meetings and now just nodded as if I were his assistant. I had asked once, casually half laughing, if everything was okay between us. He kissed me but his eyes stayed distant, fingers scrolling on his phone mid-embrace. So yes, maybe I was overthinking. Or maybe I was just waking up. I was heading down the corridor toward the west side elevators, coat in hand, when I heard his voice. The conference room light was on, the door slightly ajar. His silhouette paced behind the frosted glass, and at first, I assumed he was on a client call. Until I heard him say my name. Cameron's getting suspicious. I stopped walking. He laughed, sharp and too familiar. She asked if we'd changed the pitch schedule. I told her it was moved. She didn't believe me. There was silence on the other end of the call. Whoever he was speaking to must have said something sarcastic because he responded with, "Relax. She's smart but she trusts me. Just keep playing dumb until we close the deal." I froze. He walked past the glass again, still unaware I was there. Yeah. She'd never believe I'd hand it off. That deck is gold. She worked on it for months. You'll kill it in the November meet if you dress it up a bit. He paused again then laughed. Of course she won't find out. She thinks we're a team. I didn't remember getting to the elevator. My hand trembled on the button. Somewhere between the dull hum of the hallway lights and the ringing in my ears, I told myself it wasn't what it sounded like. It couldn't be. I was the strategist, the planner, the fixer. I was the one who'd stayed up for 72 hours during the global rebrand, who had landed the 3 biggest clients in our entire history. I had built the deck he was talking about, our biggest campaign to date. Months of insights, storytelling, tailored vision. And he had given it away? I stood there for a long minute before walking back down the hallway. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. I needed confirmation, not paranoia. When I reached Julian's glass office, it was dark. The lock code hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. I stepped inside, flicked on the small desk lamp and sat down at his computer. It wasn't locked. My stomach turned. I opened his browser. Email was already active, tabs everywhere. He was always chaotic with organization but neurotically possessive about his inbox. I had never touched it until now. It didn't take long. Subject lines bled into each other. Transfer of campaign outline, assets from Cameron's folder attached, final deck edits, do not CC M&V team. My name appeared more times than I wanted to count. Each thread more damning than the last. He hadn't just shared my campaign. He had stripped the authorship, edited the watermark and sent it under his name to an external contact. I clicked the sender. Vivian Black, CEO of a rival boutique agency known for swallowing smaller firms whole. I had met her once at a tech summit. She wore a silk scarf knotted tight and smiled like every conversation was beneath her. She had once called me, the quiet girl with the good instincts. Now she had my deck. I exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. My reflection in the glass behind his desk looked pale but not surprised. There was nothing dramatic about the betrayal. No lipstick on his collar, no perfume on the pillows. Just keystrokes, blind carbon copies and signatures that weren't his to write. My name had been stripped from the work I spent 6 months building. That was worse than cheating. That was erasure. The elevator dinged. I closed the inbox and stood up. Julian entered the office moments later, surprised to find the lights on. Cammy. I smiled, the kind of smile that keeps your mouth shut but bares your teeth. Hey. He looked disheveled but tried to mask it behind charm. Didn't expect you here. I thought you were going home hours ago. I was. But I left my charger. Thought I'd stop in and finish the client notes for the Ocelot account while I was here. Julian walked over and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. "Oh," he said casually, shrugging off his blazer. "I was meaning to talk to you about Ocelot." "Yeah. They're pushing back the November pitch date. Might not happen at all. Budget concerns." He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, his personal one, not the office desktop. "Maybe it's time you took a few days off." I tilted my head. "Why?" He leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. "You've been intense lately. Snapping at people. Reading too much into things. Overthinking." There was the word. Overthinking. Men always said that when women saw too much. I leaned against the edge of his desk and nodded. "You're probably right. A break sounds good." "You should go somewhere," he said. "Spa weekend? I can book it for you." "No need," I said. "I'll handle it." He seemed pleased by that. Like I was slipping back into the version of myself that wouldn't dare question him. That night I didn't go home. I packed a bag, booked a room under a different name, and sat in silence as rain tapped the windows of a hotel suite overlooking the East River. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I watched the skyline flicker like an engine about to roar. Tomorrow Julian would think I was relaxing. Delicate. Distracted. But I was done being polite. Let him believe I was overthinking. Because the truth was, I'd only just begun. I didn't go to the spa Julian suggested. Instead, I checked into the Redfern residences under the name Al Hart, a name I used years ago when I freelanced anonymously for competitor agencies, back when Marsh and Vale had just started and Julian barely had a desk, let alone a title. I paid in cash. No cards. No tracking. The suite was modest but high enough to give me a view of the skyline. From the 34th floor I could see his building, glass and smugness, and every so often I'd imagine the lights flickering off, one betrayal at a time. I dropped my duffel bag beside the dresser and opened the hardshell case I hadn't touched in over 2 years. Inside was my backup laptop. No company login. No company firewall. Just a ghost machine I used only when I needed to work off-grid. I plugged it in, booted up, and watched the soft hum glow into life. This wasn't a vacation. This was recon. Julian had always underestimated silence. In meetings, I rarely spoke unless there was a clear strategic angle. He called me elegantly cautious. I let him. I let everyone believe that. The truth was, I never wasted words. I recorded them. I pulled up a digital vault I'd once buried deep in a cloud server, encrypted 6 layers deep. Every campaign I'd built. Every proprietary data trail. Every account Julian had ever asked me to summarize for him while he smoothed the client side. I never deleted a thing. I synced the files into the ghost drive, just in case he tried to wipe the agency server once he realized what I knew. But that was phase 2. First, I needed to know how far the rot went. I opened the secure browser and logged into an old monitoring suite, a white hat tool I'd created myself. It worked like a passive tracker. Anytime my files were opened, downloaded, renamed, or transferred, I got a digital echo. Within minutes I saw it. 10, 15, 20 pings. Julian had been sending multiple versions of my deck to a contact labeled VB Capital. The initials hit my gut. Vivian Black. She hadn't just taken my idea. She was grooming it to pitch to a global cosmetics brand I had been negotiating with for 6 months. My deck was now titled Reimagined Beauty, VB Exclusive Proposal. He hadn't even changed the structure. Just lifted my brand strategy and pasted it into a sleeker font. I stared at the timestamp. The last file had been sent this morning, just 2 hours before Julian told me I was overthinking. I dug deeper. The email headers were masked, but Julian always reused passwords. He was smart, not meticulous. I used a traceable cookie I'd hidden on his tablet once during a client demo. With it, I decrypted his synced calendar history. That's when I saw her name listed under recurring night sessions. V. Black, Tuesday/Thursday, 9:30 p.m., Hudson Loft. He'd saved the location as a business hub. But I knew the address. It wasn't a meeting space. It was a private studio downtown. I had toured it with him once, during a property shoot for a fragrance line. He had said the lighting was intimate. I stared at the screen. That wasn't business. And that wasn't coincidence. At 10:12 p.m. I logged into a separate console, a camera access program I had built with a few ex-tech friends when we realized how easily companies let their security firms operate on unsecured servers. I typed in the Hudson Loft building code, spoofed the admin credentials and pulled up the external security feed. The footage loaded frame by frame. At 9:45 p.m., Julian entered through the east elevator. Alone. Dressed in his trademark black coat. He typed in a key code to access the private lounge area. At 9:50 p.m. Vivian walked in. Red trench coat. No assistant. No laptop bag. By 9:57 p.m. the lights in the lounge dimmed. I didn't watch further. I didn't need to. I closed the console and leaned back in the chair, the glow of the laptop casting a halo around the hotel room's dim lighting. He had done more than betray me. He had used me. Used my mind. My work. My silence. And now he thought I was off getting a mud wrap and lemon water. Oh, Julian. I was mapping your empire from the inside. By midnight I had mapped the entire file trail. He'd used a Dropbox under a pseudonym, JM Strategy Studio. In it were folders labeled Drafts, Cameron V1, Polished VB Cut, and Final Deck. There were 42 documents in total. Every single one pulled directly from my private company folder at Marsh & Vale. He hadn't even bothered to redact the creation tags. Each one still had my digital fingerprint. CD Vale under 21. I screenshotted every detail. Exported a time-stamped chain of evidence. Packaged it into a secure zip and saved it in 3 locations. One on a flash drive, one on a remote server in Iceland, and one on my private drive marked break glass only. And then I opened a blank document. At the top I typed, Contingency Phase 1, Extraction Blueprint. I woke up the next morning to sunlight stabbing through the curtains and the faint vibration of my phone. It was Julian. Julian Marsh, 8:19 a.m. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're breathing out somewhere peaceful today, yellow heart. Julian Marsh, 8:20 a.m. I'll cover your inbox till you're back. Take your time. I stared at the screen for a long time then replied. Cameron Vale, 8:32 a.m. Sunshine, spa and solitude. Just what I needed. Thank you. Don't work too hard. He replied within minutes. Julian Marsh, 8:34 a.m. You deserve it. The man was planning to relaunch my campaign under Vivian Black's agency and was still texting me emojis. I turned off my phone and poured myself a coffee. If he thought I was the kind of woman who burned bridges in a storm, he had no idea who he was dating. I didn't burn bridges. I turned them into drawbridges, and only let in those who knew how to knock. That afternoon, I requested the building's access logs for Marsh & Vale. My old friend in the IT department, Tessa, had no idea what I was really looking for. I told her I was running a security audit for upper management. She didn't even blink. The logs showed something else. Vivian Black had been entering our building after hours, using a visitor code registered under internal training modules. Julian had been sneaking her in for weeks, possibly longer. And that meant she'd seen more than my decks. She had seen our client list, the brand maps, the social media testing suite I had spent 2 years designing. Everything. And Julian had handed it to her under the excuse of cross-agency collaboration. At 6 p.m. sharp I emailed myself one last thing from the ghost laptop. A compiled spreadsheet of every violation I'd found. I titled it, Julian. Then I encrypted it, dragged it into a digital vault and wrote the password on a paper napkin. The password? Overthinking. I watched the skyline again that night. Across the bridge, the lights in Julian's penthouse flickered on. He probably poured a glass of bourbon and played jazz on the speaker I once bought him. Maybe he texted Vivian. Maybe she was already there. It didn't matter. Because the next time Julian saw my name, it wouldn't be in his inbox. It would be on the screen, at a launch he didn't control in a room he wasn't invited to. And this time my name wouldn't be at the bottom of the deck. It would be at the top. Alone. Where it always belonged. The air inside Marsh & Vale's 14th floor boardroom was always slightly too cold, by design. Julian once claimed chilled rooms sharpened focus. I had silently disagreed. Cold rooms dulled emotion but sharpened the performance. And today he'd need one hell of a performance. The agency's biggest client, Elora Cosmetics, was minutes from arriving. They were the pinnacle of our fourth quarter portfolio. Global expansion, major digital spend, experimental branding. The kind of client most agencies couldn't keep. Except Julian had tried to keep them with a stolen campaign. I knew he'd try to pitch it today. I also knew what he'd see when he clicked the first slide. Not his deck. Not my deck. But a truth loop he wasn't ready for. I entered the office lobby wearing tailored black slacks, a high-neck silk blouse, and the gray coat Julian once said made me look too executive for creatives. I wore it on purpose. Tessa from IT spotted me first. She smiled, surprised. Cameron, weren't you on break? I rescheduled, I replied smoothly. Just here for the LR meeting. Her eyes widened. Julian said you were out till Monday. I smiled. Then this will be more fun. In the elevator I stood still, heart calm, not racing. The hotel nights had prepared me. Every document I needed had been sent in encrypted layers. The swap was clean. Tessa, unaware of the deeper stakes, had helped me reroute the media display with a simple back-end reset. And now all Julian had to do was press play. I arrived outside the boardroom 5 minutes before start. The glass walls were dimmed. The assistants were running final checks. Elra's team was in the waiting area, chatting, sipping mineral water. I didn't announce myself. Instead, I slipped into the adjacent control booth that managed the media screens. From there, I could see everything. Julian stood at the front of the room, confident, polished, smug in that deep navy suit he reserved for major pitches. His hair perfectly combed, expression neutral. He didn't look nervous. Of course not. Why would he be? He thought I was off somewhere being soothed by ocean sounds and spa steam. I leaned closer to the monitor and whispered to myself, showtime. The Elra team entered, 5 of them, led by Renata Kane, their head of global brand. Julian welcomed them with that velvet voice he used when he wanted to impress. His hands clasped over the remote control like he owned every pixel in the room. Thank you for being here, he began. Today we're presenting a vision for Elra's next global chapter. A campaign that redefines beauty, not just in tone but in tension. That line? I wrote it. He clicked to the first slide. A black screen. Julian blinked. Sorry, just 1 second. He clicked again. Still black. Then it appeared. A series of call logs. Time stamps. Audio-less screen captures. Julian Marsh. Call with Vivian Black. Julian Marsh. File transfer initiated. Julian Marsh email. Cameron final day. Slide by slide, the display revealed metadata. Enough to kill the pitch cold. Julian froze. The room did too. The Elra executives leaned forward, confused. Renata narrowed her eyes. What are we looking at? Julian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I stepped into the boardroom. Quiet heels. A straight spine. My gray coat still buttoned to the collar. Good morning, I said as every face turned toward me. Apologies for the interruption. Julian turned slowly, stunned. Cameron. I nodded to him. I heard you'd be presenting a version of our pitch. I thought I'd bring the original. He blinked. You're supposed to be out. I offered gently. I was. But then I remembered I still had the intellectual property rights to everything you planned to share. You should have double-checked that before you deleted my name. A low murmur ran through the room. Julian moved toward me. Can we talk? No, I cut in, voice calm, never raised. The floor's not yours anymore. Renata turned to me. Cameron, is this your deck? I met her eyes. It was. Before he copied it, stripped my authorship and sent it to Vivian Black at VB Capital. The metadata you're seeing now? That's a timestamp trail of every file transfer made from my internal server folder. She looked at Julian. Is this true? He didn't answer. I walked forward, tapped the remote, and the loop froze on a single screenshot. Email from Julian Marsh to V. Black. Subject. Use this version instead. Cameron's not copied. Silence. The kind that wraps around the throat and doesn't let go. Julian's hand dropped from the clicker. Cameron, he said again, softer this time. You're making this look worse than it is. No, I replied. You made it worse than it is. I'm just giving it a screen. He looked pale. His eyes flicked toward the door as if searching for someone. Maybe Vivian, maybe a miracle. Neither arrived. Renata stood slowly, her expression unreadable. I think we've seen enough. Julian moved toward her. Renata, please. This doesn't change the core concept. The strategy stands. You'll what? She said coolly. Build your next idea from scratch? He turned to me. Cameron, if this is your work, why did you let him present it? I took a breath. Because I wanted you to see exactly who he is when no one's watching. I didn't stay to hear what was said next. I handed a folder to Renata, containing all original drafts, signed dates, and a notarized copyright affidavit I'd prepared the night before. Then I turned to Julian. He opened his mouth. No words came. I smiled politely and walked out. Not a tear. Not a scream. Just the sound of quiet heels down polished floors. In the elevator I exhaled. It wasn't relief. It was ignition. They suspended him by noon. A company-wide email landed in inboxes under the dull subject line. Leadership Transition Update. Julian Marsh, CEO and co-founder of Marsh & Vale Creative, was stepping back indefinitely pending an internal review. That was corporate language for, we caught him and we're figuring out how to clean the blood without staining the rug. I read the email from the hotel sitting cross-legged on the bed, coffee cooling beside me. The message was brief. No mention of plagiarism, no mention of me. But word would spread. Offices were like aquariums. One crack and every fish panicked. By 1:45 p.m. Vivian Black's assistant called. Ms. Vale, she said, mispronouncing my last name deliberately. Ms. Black would like to invite you for tea this afternoon. She was deeply impressed by your presentation. Impressed? She had stolen it. Kept my voice measured. What time? 3. At the Maison Crest Lounge on 64th. Tell her I'll be there. I changed clothes twice before settling on navy slacks and a bone-white blouse. Nothing aggressive. Nothing apologetic. I didn't need to impress Vivian Black. I needed her to show her hand. Maison Crest was quiet, understated, lined with velvet booths and $18 plates of air-dried citrus. Vivian had chosen a corner table, her back to the window, a porcelain cup already in hand. She wore black silk, no jewelry and red lipstick. She looked the same as she had the first time I met her, expensive, bored and slightly amused by everything. Cameron, she said, standing just long enough to make the gesture feel meaningless. You've certainly made your presence known. I took the seat opposite her. Not my intention, I said. But I've learned the quiet ones get erased if they don't raise their volume now and then. Vivian smiled. Volume's one thing. Humiliation is another. He poured more tea into my cup. Jasmine. Oversteeped. I didn't humiliate him, I replied evenly. He did that himself. Vivian folded her hands. I assume you're not here to gloat. No. I'm here because you invited me. She tilted her head. I did. Because I admire what you pulled off. That campaign, flawless. The data synthesis, the narrative structure, the way it anticipates consumer sentiment before it's even tracked. She nodded to herself. You're dangerous. The kind of dangerous I like. I'm also loyal, I said. To people who don't try to erase me. Loyalty, she said, swirling her cup, is flexible in this industry. And yet you're here alone. Vivian's smile flickered just for a second. I didn't come here to fight, she said, leaning back. I came to make you an offer. I waited. You know Marsh & Vale's board will never fully recover from this. Julian was their nameplate. And without him their Q4 targets are toast. She reached into her purse, pulled out a card and slid it across the table. Come to Blacklight. Lead our innovation division. I'll triple your current salary. I didn't touch the card. Let me guess, I said. No press. No noise. Just a quiet transition, where I appear at your next summit, smile for a few photos and give you back the campaign you failed to steal. Vivian didn't blink. You have every right to be upset. I'm not upset, I said. I'm just done being used. You were never the target, she said quickly. Julian offered me the campaign. I didn't even know it was yours. You knew, I cut in. You knew the signature line was mine. You told me so in Singapore. She paused. I continued. You knew exactly what you were taking. And you knew he'd hand it over if you called him brilliant enough times. Vivian didn't deny it. Instead she leaned forward, voice low. You're sharp. I like that. But you've made some enemies. I'm not scared of enemies. She smiled again, but it was thinner this time. You should be. I've buried people for less. There was the veiled threat, polished and steeped in sugar but unmistakable. I picked up the business card, glanced at it and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Vivian, I said, you're not the only one who knows how to infiltrate a company. Her expression slipped. Just slightly. Enough to tell me I'd hit the mark. You see, I continued, Julian thought I was his strategist. He thought I was just a talent wasting away in silence. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded envelope. No name. No logo. I was neither. Vivian didn't touch it. But her eyes never left mine. Enjoy your tea, I said, rising. The next time you want to own someone, make sure they're not already 3 moves ahead. I exited the lounge without looking back. I didn't need to. Because in the envelope I left behind was a printed clause from a confidential agreement. The name at the top? Lydia Moss and Associates. One of the most ruthless corporate audit firms in the private sector. And my real employer. 10 months ago, Lydia herself approached me during a silent dinner in Shanghai. She knew Julian had ties to firms using protected IP from smaller agencies. He wanted proof. She needed someone inside. I was offered a dual role, strategist at Marsh & Vale and embedded auditor for Lydia Moss. In exchange, she guaranteed me 2 things. 1. Full access to a new startup incubator backed by her firm. 2. My name in gold on whatever I built next. Julian thought he recruited me. Vivian thought she cornered me. But I was never on their board. I was the knife under the table. That evening I returned to the Redfern suite, poured a glass of still water and opened my laptop. A new email awaited me. From Lydia Moss. Subject: impressive. Body: let the vulture circle. Then clip its wings. Ready when you are. Oh. Vivian would wait for a follow-up call. She wouldn't get one. She talked to Julian. He'd beg for a way back in. He'd suggest I could be bought. That I still cared. He didn't know I'd already signed off. And soon so would she. Because by Monday I'd have every agency she ever exploited lined up behind mine. One contract at a time. All under a new name. One she didn't know yet. But she would. I met Nico Reyes on a rooftop, 11 floors above the world I'd just dismantled. The sky was gray that evening, the kind of heavy cloud that settles in without rain. Below us, the city pulsed, neon and restless. Up here, everything was quieter, except for the low hum of jazz from inside the rooftop bar and the soft clink of ice in his glass. He was already waiting when I arrived. Tailored black suit. No tie. Crisp white shirt with one button undone. He stood beside a small marble table, back turned to the skyline, scanning the open sky like he was measuring angles. When he saw me, his posture didn't shift. But something in his eyes softened. You're early, he said. You're punctual, I replied, taking the seat across from him. I prefer knowing the difference. He smiled faintly. I like that about you. I raised an eyebrow. The paranoia or the precision? Both, he said. But mostly the part where you make it look effortless. Nico Reyes wasn't flashy. His name didn't appear on magazine covers or social posts, but he quietly moved the gears behind billion-dollar mergers. He was the kind of man who spoke in clean sentences and left no digital footprint. Private equity with government-adjacent instincts. Ruthless but never messy. And he was the one who had asked me 10 months ago, "Are you willing to be underestimated for the sake of something bigger?" I had said yes. He ordered 2 drinks, neat whiskey for him, hibiscus and lime water for me. No menus. No pretense. Just quiet knowledge of what the other preferred. Vivian took the bait, I said, watching the skyline blur as lights switched on one by one. She always does, he replied. She's too vain not to. She offered me a job. Praised my work. Called me dangerous. Nico grinned. Tao, she's right. I sipped slowly. She doesn't know about the firm. Not yet. She won't, he said. Lydia scrubbed the envelope trail. By the time Vivian tracks down that clause, the ink will be dry on your exit. I nodded. Julian. He tapped his ring finger against the base of his glass. Spinning. He's trying to negotiate a statement of goodwill. Claims it was a misunderstanding of authorship. I laughed. He used to ask me to wordsmith his apology emails. Now he needs one, Nico said. And he can't write it without me. Poetic, isn't it? I looked out past the ledge, the wind tugging gently at my coat sleeve. So what now? Nico leaned back in his chair, his voice lower now. Now you decide what you want. What I want, I repeated, not answering immediately. It was a strange sensation, not having someone else's expectations wrapped around my plans. I wasn't patching holes in a man's reputation. I wasn't protecting a firm that didn't protect me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't owe anyone anything. Except myself. I'm not ready to build for someone else again, I said quietly. Nico nodded once, like he'd expected that. Then don't, he said. Build something for yourself. And I'll back it. I looked at him for a moment, really looked. Not just the sharp lines and careful grooming, but the quiet way he made space for the truth. Julian had filled silence with performance. Nico filled it with trust. You're not afraid I'll disappear? I asked. Take the intel, the clients, the momentum, and vanish? He gave me a small, steady smile. Cameron, if you wanted to disappear, you wouldn't be sitting here. I smiled back. No, I admitted. I wouldn't. We talked for another hour. About what the incubator could be, which clients might pivot with me, which alliances were already shifting after the Eller fallout. He didn't ask me to rush. He didn't offer paperwork or ownership percentages. Just one sentence that stayed with me long after the rooftop cleared. You've already proven you can play their game. Now let them play yours. I left just before 9. Nico walked me to the elevator but didn't follow. He didn't ask for a follow-up meeting. He didn't try to own the moment. When the doors slid shut, he just nodded once. Cameron, he said, voice quiet but deliberate. Whatever you build next, it'll have your name on it. No one else's. Back in the suite, I opened a blank document. At the top I typed, Project, Veil. Under it I wrote the tagline, Built by the Overlooked. Powered by what they never saw coming. Vivian would begin to notice the silence soon. No calls. No emails. No reply to her offer. She would dig. She would try to get ahead of it. But she couldn't. Because I wasn't ahead of her. I was already gone. Julian tried calling the next day. 4 times. Each voicemail more frantic than the last. Cameron, I know what it looks like, but... You're blowing this up bigger than... You still care, right? We were something... I told Vivian you meant nothing. That one made me laugh. I texted Lydia a single word. Ready. Her reply came instantly. Let's begin. They called it a celebration of innovation, but everyone knew it was just a power shuffle in formal wear. The annual Stark Gala brought together the top agencies, investment firms, brand giants, and creative directors under one chandeliered roof. Deals were whispered over champagne. Careers were made inside halls. Reputations fell with a clink of glass. Which is exactly why Nico and I arrived together. Not early. Not late. Just on time, when everyone had already seen who else had walked in. The hush that followed us wasn't loud. It was the kind that makes heads turn and breath pause. The kind that said, something's changed. I wore deep garnet silk. Structured, simple, no jewelry but one gold cuff on my left wrist. Nico, of course, was classic. Black tux, quiet watch, no name tag. We were unmissable. And we weren't hiding. The ballroom at the Ambrosia Hotel shimmered in gold and ivory. Spotlights danced across the ceiling, scattering across the crowd like searchlights trying to find something they'd already lost. In the center of it all, industry names clustered in curated conversations. CEOs of heritage brands, disruptive founders, star analysts. And then Vivian Black. Draped in a sequin sheath, lips crimson, her hand wrapped loosely around a coupe glass. She looked radiant. Calculated. Almost untouchable. Until her eyes landed on me. For a second the expression didn't change. Then her smile twitched. Nico and I moved toward the east balcony, pausing for brief nods and subtle handshakes. He leaned toward me. You still want the video played? I didn't hesitate. Yes. But not yet. Let her make the first move. He smiled. As always, your timing. It didn't take long. Vivian appeared just before dinner was served, her voice slicing gently through the ambient chatter. Cameron, she said brightly, loud enough for surrounding tables to notice. Darling, I heard you're launching something discreet? He was good. Smooth, almost amused. The implication slid between the words. That I was small. Unimportant. Easily contained. I turned to her calmly. Hello, Vivian. I thought you might be avoiding me. She laughed. Avoid you? Never. I was just surprised to see you here, given how things ended. I tilted my head. Which part? The theft, the suspension, or the offer you made me as if none of it happened? There were small laughs from surrounding tables. Easy. Watching. Vivian narrowed her eyes. Still dramatic, I see. I gave a soft smile. Still deluded, I see. Her voice sharpened. Are we really doing this here, Cameron? No, I said. We're doing this now. I turned toward the stage where the presenter was about to introduce the Emerging Excellence segment. Nico gave the subtlest nod from our table. The screen behind the speaker flickered. And then a timeline. Email headers. File transfers. Campaign titles labeled Cameron Final Deck, altered into VB Strategy. Phone call logs between Julian and Vivian. A video, Julian saying, she suspects something. Just keep playing dumb. The speaker froze. The room stilled. Vivian's face drained. I stepped onto the platform before anyone could cut the feed. My name is Cameron Vale, I said clearly, facing the sea of stunned faces. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. That's because I spent years in the background, designing campaigns you thought were someone else's. The screen looped behind me, slower now, each frame heavy with truth. The campaign that won VB Capital the Eller bid was mine. Designed at Marsh and Vale. Stolen by Julian Marsh and sent without my consent to Vivian Black. There were audible gasps now. I continued. For months I was told I was overthinking, paranoid, and too sensitive. I looked at Vivian. That's what people say when they're afraid of being caught. The screen cut to a final frame. Confidential agreement. Cameron Vale. Founder Project Vale. Backed by Lydia Moss and Associates. I stepped down. And the room erupted, not with applause but with shock. And power-shifting silence. Vivian pushed forward. Let's not pretend this is noble, she said sharply, her voice cracking for the first time. You wanted attention. You planned this whole thing for a public stunt. I turned to her, quiet. I planned this, I said, so people like you can't keep selling stolen work wrapped in charm and champagne. She opened her mouth again. Nico stood. Vivian, he said calmly. Walk away. It wasn't a suggestion. And she knew it. 10 minutes later the gala resumed. But the room had changed. Suddenly conversations bent around me. Executives approached cautiously. Brands whispered my name like it had weight now. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let it happen. Later that night Nico and I walked the marble corridor toward the car. He glanced at me sideways. So, he said, was that revenge? I paused. Then answered honestly. No, I said. It was redirection. He raised an eyebrow. Revenge is reactive, I explained. This was about trajectory. He nodded. You changed your orbit. And I said. We reached the car. Nico opened the door but paused. There's still more to build, he said. You ready? I met his eyes. For the first time, I replied, yes. The agency launched with no press release, no ribbon cutting, no LinkedIn announcement. Just one word, etched in black on the door of a renovated loft in Tribeca. No surname. No founder bio. No tagline. It didn't need one. Because by now the right people already knew whose name sat behind the door, even if it wasn't printed on it. We were 4 people at the start. Myself, a strategist from an old competitor who quit on moral grounds, a visual creative from Paris with a criminally quiet portfolio, and a data analyst who used to build trend prediction models for hedge funds before realizing she hated suits. We didn't pitch. We didn't advertise. We just produced. And the first 2 brands we rolled out. Silent launches. Soft drops. Every design choice coded with integrity and restraint. One was a local artisan perfumery. The other was a high-performance skincare brand known once for its legacy, but buried years ago under Vivian's glossy reboot. Until they called me. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I saw the name flash on my encrypted business line. Alenia Skincare. The name sent a flicker down my spine. Years ago, I'd worked on an early prototype rebrand for them when they were still small, family-run, science-first, clean label honest. Julian had pushed Vivian to scoop them up, promising a linear international reach. What they got instead was a brand diluted into irrelevance, lost in VB's rotating door of vanity projects. Now years later they were calling me Ms. Vale. The woman's voice was soft, accented, determined. Yes. This is Talia Renault, co-founder of Alenia. I don't know if you remember me. I do. There was a pause. We watched the gala, she said. We've been watching everything since. When we left VB Capital last month, our lawyer said we should sit still. Recover. Wait. But you didn't, I said. No, she replied. Because waiting is what killed our story the first time. I leaned back in my chair. What do you want now? To be seen, she said simply. By someone who sees beneath the surface. We want Vale. When she and her team arrived the following week, they brought samples. Not in gilded jars but in unbranded glass bottles with masking tape labels. Honest. Pure. Unpolished. I listened as she told me about her mother's formulas, the science behind the new lines, and how for years, every suggestion she made had been steamrolled by glossy brand managers who couldn't pronounce half the ingredients they wanted to highlight. We don't want clean girl aesthetics, she said. We want clean conscience messaging. I nodded once. You're in the right place. The rebrand was precise. We stripped back everything. Name, packaging, tone of voice. No pinks. No frosted glass. No lies. We gave them slate blue, basalt black, and white. We built a narrative around their clinical integrity. We turned their origin story, a daughter, a sick mother, a lab in a basement, into the spine of their brand. We called it Alenia, Undone to Begin. The campaign launched at 3 a.m. Eastern Time. By 6 a.m. dermatologists were reposting it. By noon, it was trending on clean beauty subreddits. By evening it had gone viral. No paid press. No influencers. No shout-outs. Just a design that finally matched its soul. 3 days later I got a call from Julian. I didn't answer. The next day 3 more. Then an email. Subject, please. Just 10 minutes. I need to explain. I archived it. No reply. No engagement. I wasn't interested in men who only found their conscience once they'd been stripped of power. Then came the envelope. Unmarked. Hand-delivered to Vale's door. Inside, a single handwritten note. No greeting. No sign-off. Just a sentence in familiar cursive. You win. But it won't last. Vivian. The script was smooth, confident, slanted right. The kind of handwriting you get from years of crafting other people's narratives. I folded the note in half. Then again. Then dropped it into the trash bin beside my desk and returned to my laptop. There were campaigns to finalize. Clients to call. A brand we were launching in 2 days. A refugee-founded fashion label reclaiming their textiles from auction houses that had sold them out. Vivian's warning didn't sting. Because winning wasn't the point. Lasting wasn't the point. The point was telling the story right, and letting those who once had no voice speak first. Nico stopped by that evening. He didn't say much at first. Just stood at the doorway of the loft studio, watching the team bent over sketch pads, dashboards, and color swatches. I brought food, he said, lifting 2 cartons of pad thai and 1 tub of sticky rice. You really want to feed a startup team that's been living on espresso? I teased. They'll love me. He handed me a carton. Then quietly, I heard about Alenia. Their numbers broke projections. I nodded. We knew they would. He studied me a moment. You're not celebrating. I don't need to, I said. The work is louder than me now. His gaze lingered. And that note from Vivian? I looked at him. I don't need to be reminded that power doesn't die quietly. He nodded once. But you don't seem afraid. I'm not, I replied. He smiled. Then this is working. He lingered longer than usual that night. We sat at the far table overlooking the city through the studio's warehouse windows. No gala. No rooftop. No manipulation. Just real air. Real time. You were right, I said eventually. When you told me to build something for myself. No, he replied, you were just finally ready to hear it. At 2 a.m. after he left I took out the Veil prototype, our second launch still under wraps. One line in the campaign brief caught my eye. Give them a beginning they don't have to apologize for. That had been my note. But now it felt like prophecy. Because this was no longer about vindication. It was about invention. They didn't announce her. They didn't need to. When Cameron Vale walked into the room that night, it felt like gravity shifted. No music stopped. No spotlight turned. But silence bloomed like a ripple. People looked up from their conversations. Laughter froze midair. Forks paused mid-lift. She had arrived. The gala was held at the Callahan Grand, a marble and velvet-draped ballroom known more for its donor lists than its wine. It was an evening of legacy and pretense, an annual gathering of the industry's elite, where wealth shook hands with ambition. And this year, Cameron wasn't attending as someone's plus one. She was the one people had come to see. She stepped into the ballroom wearing midnight blue. Structured velvet. Minimal makeup. Hair swept back like she had nothing to hide. Nico walked beside her, flawless tuxedo 2 steps behind. Not overshadowing. Just present. The power in the room tilted. The whispers came quickly but softly. Is that? She founded Vale. After taking down Marsh and Vale and VB Capital. She looks unbothered. She was. Cameron moved with grace, her steps deliberate. She didn't seek out conversations. She didn't make rounds. She just existed. And people adjusted their posture in response. Halfway through the evening, after a polite round of champagne toasts, Cameron felt it before she saw him. Julian Marsh. Standing near the terrace exit. No name tag. No fanfare. Just a man in a half-wrinkled suit, holding a glass too tightly and pretending to be part of the scenery. When she met his gaze, he didn't look away. And neither did she. She excused herself from a conversation with a global brand executive and walked toward him. The room didn't follow. But the moment did. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at her, like he wasn't sure whether to say sorry or ask for help. She broke the silence. Julian. He nodded once. Cameron. You look well, she said neutrally. I'm not. She tilted her head. At least you're honest now. He laughed once, bitter, small. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. Good, she replied. But I have to know. He looked at her fully now, eyes bare. Was any of it real? For a second, time pulled tight. The music, the soft buzz of the gala, the distant sound of someone laughing at a table. All of it dimmed. Cameron didn't look away. It could have been, she said quietly. But you used me to feed your fear. And I used the ruins to build something clean. He swallowed. She stepped past him but paused. Good luck, Julian. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't cruel. It was closure. Then she walked away. Back at the center of the room, Nico stood waiting, a single glass in hand. No questions in his eyes. Just presence. Cameron returned to him, her steps light, untethered. He offered her the drink. He took it. Are you all right? He asked gently. She nodded once. I left something behind. And I didn't need it anymore. They stood near the tall windows as the night wore down. Industry leaders passed by with nods. Investors asked when the next Vale launch would be. Someone joked she should run for office. Cameron smiled but said little. Power wasn't loud. It didn't have to announce itself. It just was. Later, as the gala emptied and limos lined the curb, Nico helped her into a waiting car. But before the door closed, she turned to him. Do you think, she asked, this might be real? He didn't answer with words. Just reached across the seat and laced his fingers with hers. Let's find out, he said. As they drove off, the city lights smeared against the glass. Cameron leaned back, eyes half closed, the world finally quiet. She didn't look behind. Because what came next wasn't revenge. It was freedom. And maybe, just maybe, something softer. The end.